Sometimes it's pretty obvious. You show up to the ER and it looks a lot like this, but other times you'll show up, the waiting room will look like this, and you're still waiting over an hour. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. When you first get to the ER, you enter an area called triage, and in triage, you're assigned what's called an acuity level. The acuity level is a range of level 1, which is the most sick, to level 5, which is less sick. Level 1s would be things like gunshot wounds and strokes, and level 5s would be things like medication refills. So you don't necessarily get seen based in the order of the time that you got there. You get seen based in this order. So it can be pretty frustrating when you've been there for a few hours and you've seen multiple people get called back before you. This is the reason why. One of the other problems that we'll run into often that's not necessarily easily seen through the waiting room are staffing levels. There's not always an adequate amount of staff to safely staff the amount of beds that we have. So if we don't have enough nurses, techs, or ancillary staff in general, we can't see patients up to the capacity in which the emergency department allows us to. Another problem that we have is called boarding. Boarding is what describes emergency department patients that are admitted to the hospital being stuck in the ER. When you're admitted, usually you're assigned a bed upstairs on one of the hospital floors, usually being treated by an internal medicine doctor. But the hospitals have been significantly overloaded lately. And so when we admit patients, there's usually not enough beds for them and they get stuck in the ER. Well, in the ER, they take up the ER bed rooms and we're unable to see new patients in those rooms. Emergency rooms are also what's called the safety nets of our communities. We're morally and legally obligated to see absolutely anybody who walks through the doors. This isn't necessarily a critique or a negative, but it's just a reality that we face in the US healthcare system. There are many patients without health insurance, without primary care providers, or relatively unable to provide or obtain any care within our healthcare system. These people fall back and essentially end up in the emergency departments. Given how many patients are uninsured or lack the basic ability to receive primary care, the emergency departments then get significantly overloaded. So, going along the same lines of that, the emergency department's the only place in healthcare that really doesn't close. On weekends, the primary care clinics are closed, urgent cares aren't open 24 hours, bad weather closes them quite often. We don't have an option. We're there 24/7 to see absolutely anybody who walks through the doors. So just know that when you're there in the emergency department, you're waiting for multiple hours. We know you're there. We really want to do our best to make sure that you're comforted, that you're treated, that you're feeling better. But unfortunately, the system is working against us, and it's not always the easiest to navigate. The thing that I hear pretty often is that why can't we just go faster? This is a pretty unfair comment, in my opinion, just because every patient that's in the ER, once they make it back to the room, they deserve the utmost attention. They deserve the best care that they can get. Not to mention that every single lab that's ordered, every test that's ordered, it takes time. There's also another line waiting for those that's kind of similar to the initial triage. And to be honest, going quicker would just make more mistakes, which means patients weren't getting the care that they deserved. And the last reason that sometimes the ER takes so long is that I have to think. I don't always know what's going on. Sometimes I have to look things up. I'm not all knowing, and that takes time. I want to give everybody the best care I can give them. I want to make sure I'm trying to figure out what's going on. No, I definitely can't always diagnose somebody, but I can do my best to try to figure out what care they need, what follow up care they need, and that takes time. I'm just going to finish with this. Just know that if you're in the waiting room waiting, that's probably a good sign. It probably means that you're pretty stable. There's nothing life threatening, but not always, but probably. If you're being rushed back to an emergency department room, if you're being brought to a trauma bay, a resuscitation room, that means something absolutely terrible has gone wrong and you do not want to be in this situation. You do want to be the one waiting in the waiting room. So I know it sounds terrible, it feels chaotic, but just know that there's rhyme and reason behind all of it. There's theory behind all of it, and we want to do the best that we can to treat absolutely everybody that comes in. Thanks for watching.